Shabbat Shalom. It's always fun when there's a talking donkey in the Parsha. It only happens once a year, but it's a good one. I wanted to focus on the Haftarah this morning and give us a kavanah and some intention as we go into hearing the words of Micah this morning. Higid lecha adam ma tov uma Adonai doresh mimcha ki im asot mishpat va'avat chesed va'tznea lechet im Elohecha. You have been told, O mortal, what is good and what God requires of you, only to do justice and to love goodness and to walk modestly with your God. This is the plea that we're going to hear from Micah, from the words of Micah. It's the final words of our Haftarah this morning, and it pierces through the soul, particularly today and in this time. I, like many of us, was shaken by the news after Shabbat last week of the assassination attempt against former President Donald J. Trump. And in my lifetime, this is the first time that I've experienced this kind of political violence toward a president or an ex-president in our country. I know, unfortunately, and Rolly spoke about this, that this is not new to us. This kind of political violence isn't new to our country. And even many of you here can recall exactly where you were when you saw or you heard about the assassination of JFK on November 22nd of 1963. Or outside of our country, you may remember exactly where you were when you heard of the murder of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in Israel on November 4th of 1995. The Jewish calendar forces us to remember the danger of political violence at the very start of every single year. On the 3rd of Tishrei, which is the first day following Rosh Hashanah, we have Tzom Gedalia. It's a minor fast day in which we lament the assassination of Gedaliah. Gedaliah was a righteous governor of what was once the kingdom of Judah, and he was there only a few years after the destruction of the temple, which is when his assassination happened. So in our calendar, we're even told the first thing we do every year is a reminder of the pain and the destruction that can come from political violence. No matter where we stand politically, violence is never the answer. It's never the answer. It wasn't then, it isn't now, and it will never be in the future. Deep political hatred and disdain such as this that leads to violence is a direct attack on our already fragile democracy, a system which at its very core upholds the values of diversity, peaceful disagreement, and inspired engagement. And we do this through protest. We do it through voting. We do it through civil discourse. And we have come to a time when things are so fraught, as Rolly spoke about last night, that we've crossed that boundary. The attack last Shabbat was an attack on our country, on each of us, and on all of humanity. No matter where we stand politically, violence is never the answer. Amidst the emotional unrest and uncertainty that this causes for all of us as a nation, we also mourn the death of the firefighter Corey Compertor, who was killed as he shielded his family at the rally last week. And we also pray for a refuah shlema for all of the people there who were injured, David Dutch and James Koppenhaber, and also anyone there emotionally who had to experience this. We hope that everyone will recover. And so it's in this backdrop that we come this Shabbat and that we hear the words of our Haftarah this morning, that we hear the words of Micah. Higid lecha adam ma tov uma Adonai doresh mimcha. You have been told, O mortal, what is good and what God requires of you, only to do justice and to love goodness and to walk modestly with your God. The Haftarah this morning comes from the book of Micah, and the entire book itself is actually only 7 chapters. It's quite short. We know little about Micah himself, his personal life. There are some of the prophets where we know a little bit more about their personal lives, but Micah we don't. We just know a rough idea of when he was prophesying, which was around 734 BCE, and the rabbis say that he was the first of 4 groups of prophets, of minor prophets, although not so minor, of Hosea, Isaiah, and Amos. And so it gives us a sense of when he's preaching and what's happening. And it's this pasuk that we're going to read, this last one at the end of our Haftarah this morning, which arguably is the most well-known and also is why people know Micah as the prophet. And I just learned this morning that it used to be in our sanctuary before the ceiling fell that this pasuk, this line, was written across the sanctuary, in our very sanctuary, on the ceiling. So we have not only psukim that when you walk into the building, but this is the reminder of doing justice, of loving goodness, and walking modestly with God is, in a sense, a part of this spiritual home, our sanctuary. It's profoundly straightforward, and it's a formula to living a rich and meaningful spiritual life. The rabbis of the Gemara even argue that this verse, this very pasuk, is the entire Torah, that all 613 mitzvot of the Torah can be distilled into these 3 teachings: do justice, love goodness, and walk modestly with God. It's so simple, and it's so hard to live by. In a separate conversation in the Gemara about public and private mitzvot, the rabbis ask and begin to question, what does it actually mean to do these things? What do we do? They say, "My dichtiv," what's the meaning behind this pasuk, of this writing? And so they break down each part of it. And so they say, asot mishpat zeh hadin. To do justly, this is judgment, or this is justice itself, which maybe doesn't answer so much of it, but I think they feel like this is pretty straightforward. What is it to asot mishpat? To do justice? Do justice. Do judgment. Live in a world where we set up courts and where we treat each other justly. Va'avat chesed, what is it to love goodness? Zo gemilut chasadim. This means do acts of kindness. Do acts of kindness for each other, for the world. V'atznea lechet im Elohecha, what is it to walk modestly with God, which could be a little bit harder to do? This means zo hotzaat hamet v'achnasat kala lechupa. This means that you should escort, you should walk over the dead bodies to their burial, and that you should also accompany the bride to her chuppah, to her wedding canopy. And in specific, in the context, it seems to mean that this is not only the bride and the loved one who has died, but also those who are poor, who may not have other people who can do this for them. That it's a call to this kind of justice, but it's a very specific ask. What does it mean to do this? What does it mean to walk modestly with God? It's to accompany the dead. It's to bury our dead, and it's to bring the bride to her chuppah. They're tangible acts. Sometimes it feels so grandiose to say, what is it? It's to live in community. It's to show up for each other. It's to care for those who aren't being cared for. And the Gemara continues this conversation even more so, and it goes into talking about the matters that are inferred from this. They go into a halachic concept of a kal v'chomer, which means if you have something that is allowed, that's even lenient, if you have something that is more stringent that's allowed, then you know that the lenient thing, of course, would be allowed. So an example would be that, I'm not going to give a legal one, but if a shorter person is able to reach the bookshelf, then all the more so, kal v'chomer, a taller person would be able to do this. And so they infer the law from this idea. And they say that if it says that the mitzvot that we're supposed to do in public we are meant to do those humbly, then also all the more so the ones that we do privately we should do with humility, like giving charity or studying Torah. But thinking about every single mitzvah that we do, that the center of this should be humility. That's how we're in relationship with God, and that's what this pasuk is telling us. Doing justice and acts of kindness are meant to be done with humility, inside and out. The words of Micah, as the rabbis break it down, is a call for tangible acts of kindness in the wake of tragedy, in the wake of injustice, hatred, and destruction. This is exactly the message of this time of year as well. As we head into the 3 weeks toward Tisha B'Av, this coming Tuesday with the fast of Shvasrei B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, we are reminded that the temple was destroyed through senseless hatred, and how is it going to be rebuilt? Through ahavat chinam, through senseless love, radical and senseless love. In a time of hate, do good, be kind, love. It's simple, and it's hard. It's so simple. I stand here and you're like, yeah, of course. And it's like, this is exactly the Torah of our time. We're walking into this time of the calendar. But it's not impossible. It feels hard to do this, but it's not impossible. And this is exactly what the Goldberg-Poland family did in calling for a week of kindness this past week, which started on July 14th and is ending tomorrow with the 21st, although kind of ended formally as Shabbat came in. As of today, it is 287 days since their son Hirsch, his arm was blown off and he was taken as a hostage into Gaza, with an additional 115 other hostages that are still there after the tragedy and massacre of October 7th, and we pray that their return is speedy. I apologize, I have to figure out where all the papers went. We pray that they come home. And here's what Rachel said. Rachel Goldberg-Poland told the Times of Israel, she said, "We're living in a fractured time, and our beloved hostages are in unimaginable darkness. This campaign is aimed at helping us bring more light into the world." She said, "Since October 7th, we and all the other hostage families have been running to the ends of the earth in effort to meet anyone who might be able to help us save our son Hirsch and any of the other hostages, all of them. For 1 week, we will focus inwards and on our communities to further our efforts toward freeing our loved ones in captivity." So throughout this past week, all over Israel, all over the world, maybe some of you even were a part of this, we turned toward kindness, singing together, learning Torah together, baking challah together, giving to those who are in need, stepping up, loving goodness, and doing justice. In their unbearable pain and in the face of an injustice that is so brutal, it's hard to comprehend these families and what they're going through with family and loved ones in captivity. What do? They're turning to love and to real, manageable acts of kindness, and they invite each one of us to do that too. It's incredible. And while it might feel small, it feels sometimes so overwhelming with the injustice that we live through and in this world and in the brokenness and the pain and the suffering and the divisions and polarization in our country. And this is a small task that says, do goodness, act kindly. It's what makes a difference. It's this exact call that tells us what our spiritual mission is. Higid lecha adam ma tov u'ma Adonai doresh mimcha ki im asot mishpat va'avat chesed v'atznea lechet im Elohecha. You have been told, O mortal, what is good and what God requires of you, only to do justice and to love goodness and to walk modestly with your God. If we go back into the text and the context in which Micah shares this prophecy, Dr. Erica Brown writes, Micah, like many other Hebrew prophets, was concerned with the cycle of goodness and evil that affects both nations and individuals. She notes how in chapter 1 of Micah, there's a reference to the image from Zechariah of sitting beneath a fig tree in peace and security. And then, at the start of the final chapter, chapter 7, which is going to be immediately after our Haftarah ends, immediately after the pasuk that we're looking at, it says, Micah says, "Woe is me! I am become like leavings of a fig harvest, like gleanings when the vintage is over. There is not a cluster to eat, not a ripe fig I could desire." And so Dr. Brown writes, the fig tree that is the symbol of peace and prosperity can easily become shriveled without proper nourishment. When injustice becomes normative and arrogance demeans society's most vulnerable, it is in this context that the pasuk, Micah 6:8, should be read as a moral demand for a society built of individuals robed in charity and goodness, humbled by their God, walking beside the divine to imitate sacred ways of being. As Dr. Brown teaches, our pasuk reminds us to look at our reality of injustice and of arrogance, to face it in the eyes, and to dress ourselves in goodness. The words of our prophet cry out to us in truth thousands of years later, and I'm drawn to the simplicity of them, to the spiritual challenge they awaken or capture within us. I feel a renewed connection to the ritual that we have of reading the Haftarah on Shabbat mornings, of giving voice once again to our prophets, to learn from them again about what it means to open our eyes to the wicked and to the hatred that's around us. And even in all of that, and even seeing the destruction and the potential of destruction that it can hold, that we also can grasp hope, that we can pray for a time of goodness, and that we can even paint a clear and tangible picture of what that goodness and that arrival of that goodness will be like and feel like. In his masterpiece, The Prophets, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel reminds us that the mission of our prophets to preach justice is not about justice itself, but it's about people and our connection to God, to bring God by our side through the goodness that we choose to do. Heschel teaches, justice is not important for its own sake. The motivation for justice and the validity of its exercise lie in the blessings it brings to humanity. For justice, as stated above, is not an abstraction of value. Justice exists in relation to a person and is something done by a person. An act of injustice is condemned not because the law is broken, but because a person has been hurt. An act of injustice is condemned not because the law is broken, but because a person has been hurt. What is the image of a person, Heschel asks? A person is a being whose anguish may reach the heart of God. Higid lecha adam ma tov u'ma Adonai doresh mimcha, ki im asot mishpat ve'avat chesed ve'atznea lechet im Elohecha. You have been told, O mortals, what is good and what God requires of you, only to do justice and to love goodness and to walk modestly with your God. And so may it be in this time of unbridled hate and political unrest here in America and across the ocean in Israel and in Gaza, that we find the courage to open our ears, our hearts, our hands, to do justice, to love goodness, and to maintain our humanity as we try hard to walk modestly beside you, God. Shabbat Shalom.